Welcome to all of you who are present today and to those who are watching from home. I'm Ann Marinello, and I'm so glad to see all of you in this space this morning. I will be our service coordinator today for our minister, Reverend Leon Dunkley, and welcome to our Sunday service honoring Martin Luther King. If you are visiting, we invite you to introduce yourself and/or sign the guest book at the back of the sanctuary. I don't know if there's anyone visiting today, but and if you've been attending here but have not signed the book as a member, you might want to consider signing it today if you wish to vote in our annual meeting, which is coming up next Sunday. And this is the Parish Records, a very old book that people have signed over the years to become members, and it'll be at the back with Ann Winya. There are also hearing devices at the back of the church, which we invite you to borrow, as well as large type hymnals and programs. Please quiet any devices that may interrupt us this morning. And after the service, all are invited to our social hall for coffee, light snacks, and conversation. It's a great way to connect with new folks and old friends. You can get there via the stairs, which are at the back of the church, or going through this door and on down the stairs there. Also, there is childcare today, although Tatum is not here, but I thought it was David, but you're going to be doing it, Ann. So thank you. In the car. Oh, okay, thank you so much. So childcare is available, and they will go with Ann. We'll sing them out later on in the service, after the lighting of the chalice. Are there any other announcements other than those that are in the program?
I have one,
yeah. Leon.
This announcement is political. I'm just very happy that 28 minutes ago, the New York Times reported that the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is going into effect as we speak.
This is a challenging time. When I was first asked to service coordinate today, I wanted to help, but I felt stymied as to how I could present a positive message to all of you with all that is going on in the world these days, when we all need hope and courage. Leon said he'd be talking about the fires in LA, I presume, and with the coming inauguration, Ukraine, and now I think you just said that the ceasefire is going through. I couldn't. So much to take in, to comprehend. Here are some of the thoughts that I came up with. We celebrate Martin Luther King Day tomorrow with gratitude for what he brought to our country. We accept that it will also be Inauguration Day tomorrow, which many celebrate and many seek ways to accept and stand up to the reality of this new administration. We celebrate the possibility, or now the joy, of a ceasefire in the Mideast, waiting to see how it is implemented. We celebrate responders from all over our country and even other nations to the fires in Los Angeles, and mourn the deep losses of so many, of loved ones, of homes, churches, schools, as we look at what went wrong and what might have been preventable and the effects of climate change. And we also need to pause and look for the helpers, as Mr. Rogers used to say. I think about our daughter Heather, who some nicknamed the brass knuckle immigration lawyers, when she was working at Martha's Vineyard one year. Last week, she arrived at work to find 320 unread messages on her phone, all seeking assistance for the immigrants in our country, especially with leaks of proposed action coming up this week in Chicago. She's having trouble sleeping. And then I thought about a Christmas gift from our granddaughter, Mela Landis Marinello, who is our youngest son, Kyle's 16-year-old daughter, who shared with us some of her writings as a Christmas present, and this was the little booklet that she made with her own art on the cover. One of the poems is entitled, "We Must Tend Our Beautiful Earth." And so these are the words of Mela. Hope is the crocuses, bursting ephemeral from the snow-frozen ground, delicate purple blossoms curling open towards the sun. Peace is the loon's call, mournful song echoing across the lake, water rippling in the moonlight. Strength is the old oak trees, firmly rooted in the soil, green leafy crowns swaying in the breeze. Beauty is the rainwater, collected in the embrace of a new leaf, held safely within a flower's cup. Mystery is a cloudless sky, bright pinpricks of stars, constellations tracing the heavens. Love is the breeze flowing through the hills, guiding the bees and the butterflies with their nectar, sending dandelion puffs spinning across the fields. Life is the flowing creek, dancing through the whorls of ice, swirls of water ever moving. Earth is the hands that hold us, the ground that moves beneath our feet. We are the keepers, and we must tend to this beautiful world.
Good morning and good Sunday. I hope this new day finds you well. Today is Sunday, January the 19th, and the title of this morning's reflection is Cease Fires, Cease. It's a reflection about what rises in us when we are forced to face challenging times. It seems strange somehow that the uniformed policeman moved with such urgency. You can see it in the photograph on the cover of the Orders of Service. It's strange that he moved with such urgency to remove the carnation from the barrel of the rifle that was pointed at student protesters who had gathered in Lafayette Park in 1967 to protest the war in Vietnam. As if the tough stem of the flower might break the gun somehow. As if the gentle petals might impede the fired bullet. I wrote a song as war unfolded in the aftermath of the tragedies of 9/11. The song was called "The Wars Can End." It began with a question: are you ready or are you satisfied? It began with a question raised to a person named Softly who stands before God. I never knew who that person was, whether that person was me or whether that person was us somehow. At the time, I didn't know how to resist. The best I could do was write down this song. The words were these: are you ready or are you satisfied? softly who stands before God? Are you satisfied with the alibis of a young man? Cry the ancient souls. Cry daughters of ocean and earth, and cry the cross of gold. To be worthy sons of Abraham, we are marched as a nation at arms through a holy land as soldiers, mothers, and presidents, all waging a war with such soul-enraging innocence. Have we chosen station beneath the blade, born of a conquering steel that angels have betrayed? How we worry, the things that we're guilty of, the reasons we fall to our knees, and the ways we love. Does glory sing my name for the cannons taking aim? No. Glory sings my name, and glory sings thine. And when glory sings my name, and I'm thine, the wars can end. It seems strange somehow that the uniformed policemen moved with such urgency to remove the carnation from the barrel of the rifle that was pointed at the student protesters who had gathered in Lafayette Park in 1967 to protest the war in Vietnam. As if the tough stem of the flower might break the gun somehow, as if the petals might impede the fired bullet. The rifles weren't loaded anyway. It was a different time. The flower children did not choose to beat policemen. They did not storm the Capitol. They were not murderous. They were tough, and they were gentle, like the flowers that they carried. By their insistent spirit and by grace, they were driven to peace, driven by the power of their convictions, driven by a fire in the soul. In a book entitled Mind on Fire, Ralph Waldo Emerson is credited with having said the following: "Great truths demand great utterance. Highest truths need highest utterance, which means poetry. The religious nature finds its full expression only in communication between people. When poetry or preaching or lecturing achieves this, it's doing its job." In a world on fire, we need highest truths to do their job. We need lectures and preaching and poetry to do their job and to do it well. As Dr. King reminds us, now is the time. In August of 1963, King said, "We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Now is the time for highest truth to do its job. And part of that highest truth, perhaps the most precious part of that highest truth, resides in you, resides in us. In the clenching of the fist, in the center of the chest, in the power of our voices lifted high and so beautifully. James Taylor sings this clearly to us. He sings out, "Let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, of sister and brotherhood. And we are bound together in our desire to see the world become a place in which our children can grow free and strong. And we are bound together by the task that stands before us and the road that lies ahead. We are bound. There is a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There is a hunger in the center of the chest." This feeling, this hunger, was strong and was very real for us back then when we were protesting the war in Vietnam. This feeling, this hunger is strong and very real for us right now. What do you feel in your soul these days? What do you hunger for? Be honest and be careful and courageous when answering. Our spiritual lives depend on this. Now is not the time. Now is not the first time that we've been up against a sea of troubles. We have seen this kind of challenge many times. Even though it's miraculous, it's quite commonplace for us to stand together against the challenges. It happens all the time. You just have to know how to look for it. The clenching of the fist is everywhere, reminding of the ways in which it is healthy to resist. The hunger in the center of the chest is like the northern star, a constancy leading us to wisdom and deep compassion. We need them now, as wildfires are ravaging our city of angels in California. Cease, fires, cease. Peace, be still. Be still, my beating heart. We long to be led to wisdom and compassion. We need wisdom and compassion now. As wildly fired bullets and wildly dropping bombs that we've made are ravaging a holy land. Cease, fires, cease. There was beauty on the streets of Los Angeles recently. There was immeasurable beauty as people gathered together, people whose homes had burned down completely, families that had just lost everything. There was such beauty as people gathered in parking lots turned into makeshift relief centers to help one another through overwhelming crisis. Nearly 30 people have lost their lives. Those losses touch this community, just as it touches communities all across the country. Cease, fires, cease. Peace, be still. Be still, my beating heart. There is no good news in this, which is to say that the good news is difficult to see. The good news is something that is set deeply inside of us, so deeply that we forget sometimes how important we are to one another. It's disquieting. It might look like madness to talk about the good news in the context of catastrophe. Catastrophe meaning the wildfires in Los Angeles and the wildfire in Israel and Gaza. But we must do this. We must talk about the good news. We must become bold enough to do so. Because when we show this kind of courage, when we show this kind of strength, when we push back on what Carl Jung called the spirit of evil in the world. Carl Jung was the famous psychotherapist. He was ahead of his time. Jung believed that the spirit of evil was the negation of life force by fear. Our boldness, he said, can deliver us from fear. And if the risk of being bold is not taken, the meaning of life is violated. It's hard to be bold, especially in a northern New England small town. It's much easier in Boston or in Brooklyn. It's much easier in New Orleans with the comfort of relative anonymity, in places where boldness is commonplace, in places where boldness is part of the norm, in places where you're actually rewarded for it, not penalized, not stigmatized. And yet it is so important to be bold, even though boldness looks like madness in the context of catastrophe. Talking about the good news in Los Angeles or in Gaza looks like madness from a distance. It might be madness, I don't know. And yet, within the madness, there is beauty to be found. We have to summon up courage enough to see it soul level deep. We can't just stand out at safe different distances and pretend we are removed. Holy Moses. God, I hope that we do not suffer this fate A poet writes, "I know that the biggest crime is just to throw up your hands and say, this has nothing to do with me, I just want to live as comfortably as I can. You've got to look outside your eyes. You've got to think outside your brain. You've got to walk outside your life to where the neighborhood changes." Ani DeFranco is the poet, and she sings these words courageously, boldly, in defense of the meaning of life. What would you do to defend the meaning of life? Are you willing to be foolish? Are you ready to be bold? Will you dare the edge of what seems like madness from a distance? Will you choose to risk the penalty and the stigma? Now, when I say madness, I'm not talking about a psychological condition. I don't know about such conditions. I am not qualified to talk about such things. The kind of madness that interests me is the kind of life-embracing boldness, a spiritual tenacity that leads us over troubled waters, a steadying courage that guides us as we walk that high and narrow bridge, the one that we all must cross in order to become our full selves. High and narrow bridges always seem dangerous. Many of these bridges actually are dangerous. Sometimes crossing is risky. Sometimes crossing them looks like madness. It looks like madness in Los Angeles. It looks like madness in Israel and in Gaza. The good news looks like madness in the context of catastrophe. The good news looks like the kind of beautiful madness that we see now. In Los Angeles, in LA, we see a beautiful kind of madness. There was a great interview on PBS NewsHour. I don't know if you heard it. The NewsHour hosted by Amna Nawaz. She reported faithfully, and this I quote, "While the Los Angeles wildfires have brought vast destruction and loss, we have also witnessed great and the best of humanity, with Californians stepping up to help their neighbors in any way they can. We spoke with many people working around the clock to help those who are affected. Here is some of what they said." Their voices, the voices of the people of Los Angeles, were so inspiring. "My name is Victor Dominguez. I am the president and CEO of the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles. Almost immediately, we started 15 distribution sites across the city of Los Angeles, across the county of Los Angeles. We've engaged more than 20,000 volunteers in less than a week. We've opened up our facilities free of charge so that anyone needing to take a shower, anyone needing some family time, anyone needing time for well-being, they can access any of my 27 YMCAs across the county. Their voices were so inspiring. My name is Jackie Fila. I am the president and CEO of the Hotel Association of Los Angeles. We wanted to make sure that people understood, number one, rooms were available, and we also wanted to make a kind of one-stop shop so that they weren't calling around trying to figure out what was available in the area. Me and my mighty team of one other person. We wanted to create this document with access to what were legitimate special offers that are available at hotels. Our goal was to centralize information as quickly as possible. They were inspiring. My name is Faraz Ayad, and along with Eric Armstrong, we are the founders and operators of No Res Gourmet. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to address hunger in the United States. We cook meals and we distribute to those in need. So this is a similar idea, but obviously on a much larger scale, which required the activation of as many people as possible. Inspiring. My name is Andrew Gruel. I'm the owner and chef at Calico Restaurant with my wife, Lauren. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, and I said, anybody who needs a place to stay for a temporary period, come down. We have 80 parking spaces at our restaurant. And then Lauren put out a call to action for donations. It's funny because we were like, oh, it's gonna be like 2 boxes worth. And fast forward like 12 or 24 hours, and we had 3 full Amazon trucks with products that immediately got delivered. We had volunteers from every political spectrum, people dressed up in MAGA gear, next to people who were dressed up in the opposite gear, which I don't know what that is. All coming together to help each other out, loading up the trucks. It was like, it was just the greatest feeling. End quote. This is American greatness. Our indivisibility. Nothing less. Anything less is not worthy of decency and dignity. Mexico sent firefighters. Mexico did. Despite the wall and the barbed wire fences, sometimes submerged in rivers, the years of racist insults, the ritualized rhetoric of rapacity. Mexico sent firefighters to Los Angeles. A team of proud and courageous Mexican firefighters stood shoulder to shoulder, uniformed and ready, holding the Mexican flag and the American flag side by side. In solidarity and in partnership, through conflict and in consensus, in our hour of need, Mexico sent firefighters to Los Angeles, one of many American cities that bears the Spanish name. As Amy Goodman recently reported on Democracy Now!, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, sounds like a Mexican name, right? Embrace me our complexity, right? Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum sent a team of Mexican firefighters to Los Angeles. Laura Vasquez Alzua is the head of Mexico's civil protection. She said, "We will stay as long as necessary. We will support in a spirit of solidarity and with all of our experience and commitment to the people of California." How crazy is that? What madness is this? Such grace that is being offered to us after how shamefully some of us have been acting. This is good news. It only looks like madness. It only masquerades. The good news is never madness in the context of catastrophe. The good news is never madness in any context. It just seems that way when we've been brazen, when we have not yet been bold. Are you ready? Are you ready to be bold? Will you dare the edge of that which seems like madness to the faithless? Will you choose to risk the penalty and the stigma of being beautiful? As many of you know, the cost is very real. The cost of truly being who we are is very real. At the same time, the cost of not being who we are is very real. We may seek the short-term advantage of hiding, but in the long run, it doesn't do us any good. The Eagles wrote a song called "The Long Run" in the 1980s. If it was legal, I would play it for you and we could all dance here in the sanctuary. But I've been singing this song by the Eagles in UU churches all of my life, but it still worries me somehow to say this from the pulpit as a minister. I feel like I'm admitting to something. It feels incongruous, but it is my truth, and I'm not going to lie to you about that. It is important not to hide. It's important not to avoid the risk, the cost, the penalty, or the stigma of being truly ourselves. Why would any of us choose to do such a thing? The Eagles asked, did you do it for spite? Did you do it for money? Did you do it for love? Did you think you had to, honey? Who is going to make it, we'll find out in the long run. And we can handle some resistance if our love is a strong one. We were scared. We ain't shaking. We're trying to bend, but we ain't breaking. The photo on the cover of your order of service was taken at the March on the Pentagon protest in October of 1967. 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days after Martin Luther King gave his powerful address, the Beyond Vietnam speech in the Riverside Church, in Manhattan. King said, "Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I need not pause to say how delighted I am to be here tonight, how very delighted I am to see you expressing your concern about the issues we will be discussing tonight by turning out in such large numbers. I also want to say that I consider it a great honor to share this program with Dr. Bennett, Dr. Kumminger, and Rabbi Heschel, some of the most distinguished leaders and personalities in our nation. And of course, it is always good to come back to the Riverside Church. Over the last 8 years, I have had the privilege of preaching here almost every year in that period, and it's always a rich and rewarding experience to come to this great church and this great pulpit. I come to this great, magnificent house of worship tonight because my conscience leaves me no other choice. I join you in this meeting because I am in deepest agreement with the aims and the work of the organization that has brought us together, clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam. The recent statements of your executive committee are the sentiments of my own heart. I found myself in full accord when I read the opening lines, "A time comes when silence is betrayal." That time has come for us in relation to Vietnam. Now, it was madness for Dr. King to say this. By expressing his views on human rights, according to the laws of our culture at the time, he jeopardized his position as a civil rights leader. He was asked to choose between that which is indivisible. He was rejected, he was scorned, he was reviled, and a year to the day from his delivery of this address, he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. In a song entitled "In the Name of Love," Bono, the rock group U2, sang out, "Early morning, April 4, a shot rings out in a Memphis sky, free at last, they took your life, and they could not take your pride." The poetry is inaccurate. King was killed early that evening, but Bono is a part of the pride. Humanitarian lion that he is, he's part of the pride. He is part of that which is the continuing and lasting peaceful legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Victor Dominguez is part of the pride, the leader of the YMCA in Los Angeles, and Jackie Fila is part of the pride, the CEO of the Hotel Association in LA, and Faraz Ayad and Eric Armstrong are part of the pride, feeding the angels in church parking lots. And Andrew and Lauren Gruel are part of the pride from the Calico restaurant. And Claudia Scheinbaum is part of the pride, the president of Mexico, and Laura Vasquez Alzua is part of the pride, the head of Mexico's civil protection. And the Mexican firefighters are part of the pride as they save our city of angels. Are we ready to be part of the pride? Are we prepared to be that courageous? Are we willing to be that bold? It's still strange somehow that the uniformed policemen moved with such urgency to remove the carnation from the barrel of the rifle that was pointed at the protesters who had gathered in Lafayette Park in 1967 to protest the war in Vietnam. We expelled those student protesters from our colleges and universities these days. We fire the professors who ardently defend them. And we can turn all of this around. And we can lay God's rifle down. And we can learn to sing, "Cease, fires, cease." May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Look for the helpers, Mr. Rogers said. It was Fred Rogers, right? That's his name? When I was thinking about it, I was like pretty sure his first name was Mr. He found something joyful in us, and he fought more fiercely than I can tell you. And he maintained his grace. He never compromised that. As we move forward, part of the lion's pride that we are, may we remember his grace, the tenacity of those who struggled in 67. For they live in us today. From Martin Luther King to Anita Franco and beyond. May it be so. Blessed be. And amen.